All right. Well, welcome back from lunch. Okay, we'll get started. I hope you were all able to enjoy the break and hopefully a little fresh air. But to start our afternoon, I'd like to ask Dr. Leslie King to join me on stage. Dr. King resides in Oregon, where she serves as a governor-appointed commissioner for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. As commissioner, she highlights the need for justice, equity, diversion, and inclusion in environmental policy and decision-making. Her oft-repeated mantra of recognition is the first step to cure, when highlighting societal inequities, holds true for the practice of river restoration. Her goal is to introduce the concept of environmental justice to the practice of river restoration.
Hello, all. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Many people have thanked me for being here. I want to thank you for having me. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying meeting all of you. So I do have a presentation. You guys are getting yourselves organized somewhere, somehow. Is it there? Okay. Oh, that one. Okay, got it. There's a lot of technology up here happening. But as you heard, I am a medical doctor, but I also have environmental training. So what that has meant is I've spent my medical career trying to connect doctors to the environment, trying to say, if we have an asthmatic that we send home into a polluted neighborhood, they're going to come back with asthma. And there was always this, treat the patient, ignore the environment. And so now that I'm doing the environmental stuff, I get the opposite. I'm just like, we are in the environment. We are impacting it in every way. We're probably impacting it the most. We have been since arrival. But all we ever talk about is fish and fish passage and lamprey and wolves and everything else but the people. So I find myself at the opposite. I always find myself kind of seesawing back and forth and constantly having to explain. And it's nice to come to conferences like this. It looks like our Nez Perce and Yakima have left us, but it's always so good to see them because they are in the Columbia River Basin. They're part of the tribes. However, they are across state lines from us for Oregon, so we don't see them near as much. But it's always so good to hear them because they instinctively understand time is a circle. They also understand that people are part of the environment. Like from jump, Keilani said, there's salmon, there's also lamprey in the trees. They're at the top of the ridge, but once upon a time, they were at the bottom, down by the river. They create the nitrogen base, which creates everything we see. So you go from the top to the bottom to the top again because time is a circle. And they understand that instinctively. I never have to explain that to Indigenous people. So it's always so wonderful to kind of have them in the room and kind of get that energy. And hopefully that gets out to more of us. Because since Plymouth Rock, we have been looking at a landscape that has been managed. It's a mosaic. North America, all of the Americas, the land of maize. That's not by accident. That's because of millennia of genetic engineering by Native American people to create the modern corn crop that we see today. So it's always been connected. But as people before me have mentioned, we severed that. So my whole goal with all of this is to reconnect that and start to talk about the people. Okay, and so that brings me to just to give you just a little bit of understanding, because I'm from the East Coast, so I understand East Coast size river. And what we see here, sorry, it's there for me, is kind of a little East Coast sized dam, okay? Yes, Mississippi. We all know, we know how to spell it before we can even, for illiterate, M-I, crooked letter, right? It is the hardest working river east of the Continental Divide. West of the Continental Divide, we have a river just as broad, just as wide as the Mississippi, but it's only half the length, okay? Takes the Mac Daddy continent of the dam of the continent to hold it back, the Grand Coulee. Plus there's 17 more, some of which you've seen, again from the tribes. Celilo Falls was one of the places that was flooded, okay? You saw everyone loves the pictures, myself included, all the footage of the blowing up the Condit Dam. That is also part of big dams, part of the Columbia system, okay? It is a river system big enough for orca. They do swim in. They come all the way to Longview. Why? The Chinook. That's what they're trying to eat, okay? So The other thing to remember, because it is connected to what we call Cape D, Cape Disappointment, named so because until motorized watercraft, all you could do was watch the guys die. Okay, it's one of those places where Poseidon is swirling his trident. Okay, and so to give you a sense of, again, how big that river system, the Columbia has a tide, as does the Willamette, which is the river that comes in through Portland, named so for the spill water, Willamette, that we now call Willamette Falls. Second biggest falls, only one bigger is Niagara, okay? And it comes all the way through, all the way south of the river, south of the city, all the way to Milwaukee, all the way, sorry, I keep pointing in the wrong place, I'm sorry, all the way to the Kellogg Dam, okay? The Kellogg Creek has a tide. It moves 2 feet a day, twice a day, all right? So even though it's a little teeny, by our standards, it's a little teeny sized dam, you have to understand the impact it is in this huge, huge system, okay? So hopefully that gets you some scale, particularly for Easterners that don't understand like how big all of this is. It's massive, and that's why kind of they make it in the news, okay? And to give it a sense of how massive it is, all those things I've talked about still aren't the snake. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, ooh, green, right? Okay. Environmental justice, this is the federal definition. God help us. What I did is this. Okay, environmental justice has existed since 1994. It's a millennial, okay? It's 30 years old. First, I guess, administration of Clinton, okay? It's an entire division of the EPA, all right? Nobody knows what it is until all of a sudden somebody threw like $60 billion at it, and so now everybody wants to know what it is, all right? So officially, it is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement, and so on and so on and so on. So that's the key phrase, the one that I highlighted, okay? That's what you got to focus on when we're talking about environmental justice, and that's what brings in the people, okay? Some quick facts. So over 50% of residents who live less than 2 miles from toxic waste are people of color, so that's the POC. Sorry, that's that abbreviation. 53% of people living within 3 miles of the worst coal polluting plants are people of color. Communities below the poverty line have a 35% higher burden of particulate matter emissions, usually diesel particulates, but can be anything, okay? Compared to the population, it's over half. It's 54% if you're black. And this one, the father of environmental justice, Robert Bullock, I think it's Robert, but his last name is Bullock for sure, proved this one, that black homeowners got, on average, 8K less after Katrina. Basically, he just proved that everyone suffers from natural disasters. We don't all recover equally. And so that was the environmental justice point that he made. Okay, so this is state of Oregon, because this is what I have the maps for. And why I use this is GIS in its most powerful form, because now you can load in census tract data. So it's not just hydrological, it's hydrosocial. And so this shows us the state, what the variables for vulnerability, okay? There's always 4 things. It can include more, but there's always 4 in the base. People of color, low income, low education, low rates of home ownership. It's always those 4. Now you can add a bunch of things like English as a second language, tribal, elderly, particularly elderly Asian. There's all sorts of other things you can add, but it's always those 4, okay? People of color, low income, low education, low rates of home ownership, always. And the reason I show the state slide is something that I hammer all the time. Environmental justice is not just about the cities. So again, I'll move a little bit so that you can see. I have a pointer, I think it'll do something. So hopefully you guys can see me. So for example, Portland is right. Is this now? Can you see it? Is that on the screen? I can see it, but you guys can't. That's Portland. Okay, just to give you some scale. Okay. So you see things like Hood River. A lot of these you'll see are tribal communities. Okay, not all. All right. That is in another time zone. It's called Oregon, Idaho. So have you ever heard of Ore-Ida potatoes? Okay. give it scale, Klamath is the poorest region of the state. Has nothing to do with urban. All right? So that is the point that I make up like all the time, why I always show the state map. Environmental justice is not just about cities. Okay? And right now, at least we're kind of really missing the tribal component. That's a whole different conversation. There's specific tribal money. Something like 20% was set aside just for them. But there's some barriers as to them reaching it at this stage. Okay? But what we're going to talk about is Portland in particular. Did it go? Yep. So you can see where I tried to highlight that area of Portland, and then it shows you the Portland Metro, which is 3 counties. Okay? Where I want you to focus, I'll do it on this side this time, is here. Milwaukee, which is the different spelling of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. It's named for the same place, however, the people were from there, okay? So that's the area where the Kellogg Dam is in Milwaukee, okay? And what to notice on the map is the difference, the disparity just above Milwaukee and then Milwaukee itself. Now, Milwaukee is changing. Milwaukee's gentrifying because, like so many places, Portland has become unaffordable. The max has come through. There's been a lot of things that have like sweetened the deal, if you will, for Milwaukee, and it's become kind of this up-and-coming sort of place. So it used to be that really dense orange color that you see in some of the areas of the city, but it's getting kind of lighter, 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 as opposed to the areas just north of it where you can see like a lot of blue. Those are kind of some of the old money established neighborhoods of Portland, $1 million homes, former timber barons, those kind of neighborhoods, okay? So the contrast is what happens, what does your river or your spring or your watershed look like when you live in one of the old money neighborhoods versus when you live just south in the orange, if you will, okay? When you live above, that's what your river looks like. That is the Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden. It is the only botanical garden on the West Coast to make the top 10. It is stunning in every way. It is important because not only was the restoration important beautifully, but it's important for the chum salmon. It's one of the few in the Oregon Metro where they come back in the Portland Metro. And it's important to remember, in Portland Metro, we are outsized. I think it's 18 endangered species within our city limits. It's different by any other city by a factor of 2. So chum is one of the many, okay? So that's one of the places where they return. Right across the street from them is a place called Reed College. Fancy private college where they have water fountains for your dog. Not kidding. Okay. They did their own private restoration, and it's called Reed Canyon. And so what happens is the Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden is part of Portland Park Systems, and they have weird hours. You got to pay $5. So most people like me just skip it, and you can just go to Reed College. You can just literally go right across the street and see the same system. And quite literally, for all the fish bios that are always among us, like you can literally stand there and see the baby salmon. You can tell which one is which. You can do all the ID in a city. This is within city limits. Like I said, 18 within city. It's amazing. It's really, really stunning. And you think this should be everywhere. It's not. Because when you live in, remember the orange, so just below that, less than 3 miles, you can walk, you can bike. There's all sorts of public transportation that'll get you there. Here's hoping the timing works. Before Illinois was the land of Lincoln, before the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter, before the northern Shoshone territory known as Agua Peon, or River of the West, became Oregon, the 33rd state. That happened in 1859. Before all of that, there was the Kellogg Dam. There's the beast. Okay, 1848, I think is the date. So, and fish passage law predates Oregon. So from the minute this thing was built, it was illegal. Okay? Why is it there? Long story, but essentially for financial benefit. Built 1858. Kellogg, and he came as one of the homesteaders during the donation land claim, claimed his 160 and his wife's on either side of this, what was called Cold Creek, okay? Because you'll see in a minute that it's spring fed, so it's all cold water. I dammed it to power a flour mill, specifically the Standard mill. Okay, and all of that, look at the timing, 1848, what happened with the 49ers? It all went to the gold rush. Okay, so that is why it exists. It became a mill pond, it became all sorts of other things, but it was generating power. Until 1901, it sort of collapsed or caught on fire or both. It just sort of vanishes off the record. Okay, ODOT, which is Oregon Department of Transportation, bought it and integrated it into the highway in the 30s. Okay, a fish ladder was installed like in the 50s or so. You saw what that fish ladder looks like. You just wonder why they even bothered. It was modified in about 2003. Okay, so basically it was there for 100 years as a full fish passage barrier. And lamprey. I'll show you where the lamprey are. Okay, so full fish passage barrier. We now have that little something fish ladder thing that doesn't do much. Okay, and this just kind of shows the story a little bit. Now you can see that shows this thing. Ooh, did I go one too far? Yeah, let me just go back just 1 second. So this is the highway. Okay, so that's why ODOT bought it. Okay, and you'll see that again in a minute. And sorry, that is the railroad. Okay, so you'll see all of these things again in just a minute. So this was, I've forgotten his name, it's on here somewhere, Whitcomb. So Whitcomb he was a steamship guy and did a lot of industry, so he eventually bought it. I think he bought from the Kellogg's, and that's where a lot of the, thank you, a lot of it comes from. So you've seen that slide, there we go. So this is what it looks like today, because you can still see the railroad bridge up there. There's the beast of Kellogg. This is where the lamprey are, full fish passage barrier. Okay, they're actually in there, in the soil. Been there for hundreds of years. We get rid of that dam, turn them loose, they will go back. Okay, we're the problem, not them, right? This just gives you a sense of that ridiculous fish ladder. At the bottom there's sort of a whirlpool. Neil, who runs the watershed there, says the only thing he's ever seen coming down is a river otter. He's never seen a fish. This is probably the few fish that get by. This is how they get by. They just shoot the gap. They probably don't go through the ladder. Okay. This is Boney. He's one of the mascots there in the impoundment. So you can see there's I think that's a grocery cart. It's silt to your neck. I mean, it's just garbage in there. There's everything in there that you can imagine, okay? The guy paddles out there and puts varying art on that little island thing. It's almost always a toxic algal bloom. When you talked about the methane, I thought exactly about this. This is Amy, who works in the watershed. You gotta love your job to smile in the midst of all of that. They're doing a lot of the core sampling now and the measurements, because Interflube, who's McKinsey in the back, they're doing all their measurements that all you physical river scientists do. I'm a doctor, I don't know that. But they're doing all of those things to prepare for, I think we're in phase 2 now. Okay, and this just shows you, again, a map, a disparity map, specifically around the Kellogg Dam, and you can see kind of that deep orange right around where the dam is. So, let's talk about some rather typical watershed speak. I've heard it today, anadromy. I call it the A word, okay? Restoration of 14.5 acres, regional trail connections, highway bridge improvements, increased floodway capacity, all these things, climate resiliency. These are all the things we always talk about, and this gives us that 14.5 acres, and you can see it's all creeks that are all spring fed. So this will be cold water refugia once we get Kellogg Dam out of the way, and this is that 14.5 acres, okay? What I would like to start to integrate into it is some social justice speak. Let's talk about strong community support. Let's talk about an equity focus area. In particular, Milwaukee High School is over 50% BIPOC and 60% free lunch. Let's talk about how that's a living laboratory, because if you can see the end, you can see where the high school is, because you can see their football fields, their baseball fields. At the end, just off the picture, there's a middle school. So there will be a complete connectivity, green space connectivity between the high school and the middle school, getting the kids involved in science, monitoring, creating websites, whatever will happen surrounding the Kellogg Dam. That will be wildlife connectivity. That will be so many things for that community. Why do we never talk about that? All we ever talk about is the A word. okay? Which is important, I get it. They're a keystone species, but they're not the only thing out there, all right? That's important. Workforce development, I touched on that, like getting the kids trained. Community partnerships, and then this one, that April and I talk about all the time, this is a first, a paid, essentially stipends for underserved community populations, like really driving community engagement. You've got to put the rubber where the road is in terms of you're expecting people to volunteer, you're expecting people to front up. These are people with no passive income. They literally can't afford it. So if we talk all this talk about equity, and the only way you're going to get marginalized groups to join you is literally to pay for it, okay? And it's not because they don't want to be engaged, it's because they literally can't. They're dependent on earnings, okay? And this is the highway. As you can see the car there in the road. So the bridge will be just this way. This is the food carts. So in that one little spot, you've got food carts, a high school, a middle school, a railroad, a light rail. It's all happening within a city that has 18 endangered species, okay? I mentioned Milwaukee High School, and we talked about where it is. The Dark Horse comics, they all went to Milwaukee High School. It's all still right there. Their buildings are right there. They're there in the midst of it as well, in the middle of a city, okay? This is my cue, like when you see me stand in the river. That's just south, Clackamas. That's a river that's also been restored. So if we restored north, we restored south, we clearly know how to do this. Let's talk about the people in the middle. This is I know I'm at time or over, but this is the Invest in Oregon. Oregon is killing it. Our 4 million is smaller than Seattle, okay? So, but we're getting outsized federal dollars, okay? And so much of it is by our pursuit of what was the IIJA. I think that's now BIL, whatever, all the acronyms. All right. And one of the things I know April wanted me to highlight is how you start. And that's something that we're talking about in this symposium here, is that you start with the private. You start with foundations, because the feds won't just give you 50 million right off the bat. Like, you have to prove a whole lot of other stuff. Okay. And it's important to note, and this always freaks everybody out, this project's going to cost north of $100 million by the time it's done, because of moving around silt and highways and bridges and railroads and impacting high schools. And this is going to be a show, not a good one. It'll be a good one in the end, but getting there won't be. And so I'm pretty sure this is my last slide. It just shows the example of the not just hydrological, but hydrosocial, how they loaded census tract data into this to create the disparity map and to show how this is important for environmental justice and for a disenfranchised, marginalized group. So I know April, she was so very proud. She made some handouts. They're lovely. They're out there. There's some folks missing. The tribes aren't here, and that's because it's not because they don't want to be. It's because they just don't have the capacity for engagement. I know we talked about that briefly. But they're very supportive. They want to be more involved. They just probably need about 100 more people working for them to be able to do all the projects that they're doing. The other thing I would note, and I picked this up as I was messing around, like, this is your own American rivers. No mention of people. We got climate resilience, fisheries, jobs, tribal rights, you know. So, I mean, that's kind of hopefully what I've brought for you guys, is that I am all about the people and looking at the impacts and the positives of the people, particularly in something that is in an urban environment like this, where there's nothing but people all around all day long. So that's me.